You're probably a superstar at work, right? You're really good at what you do at work. You're really good at providing emotional support for your friends when they come to you. And just in general, you probably feel really good about things externally. But I guarantee you there are moments where you may go home at night and at the end of the day, you feel like you failed. Not at work, not at your job, right? Not at being a good friend. But honestly, you probably feel like you fail at the thing that matters most to you. And that is being a present father, right? That's being the dad that you want to be to your own standards. And the crazy part about that is, whatever how you feel about how you need to show up, you know how to show up that way, right? You have the answers already, but why don't you? And so that's what I'm going to talk about today is finding ways how to bridge the gap between our identity and who we truly want to be as fathers. And so if that relates to you, then I would definitely stick around for this talk and I think you'll find it very, very useful. If you're new here, my name is Odini McBean. I am a mindful fatherhood coach, also creator of the 365 Dad Journal. And I just show dads how to parent more mindfully, how to be more self aware, and in general, how to be a fulfilling father and a fulfilling individual in their lives, not just dad, 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 but also how to, feel good about yourself outside of your role as a dad. And so the first thing I want to talk about is naming the experience, right? I think with all of this, sometimes we're so quick to jump right to give me the cure, or we're so quick to fix it right now. And we lose that feeling of self awareness because we never even take the time to name what's happening, right? And so if I were to name the experience you're feeling, or you have felt, or you're currently feeling, is probably you feel like you have it all together to the outside world, and you probably do. You show up great to the outside world, but internally, you probably feel like a fraud, right? You feel like, oh, man, people think I got it together, but at the end of the night, I don't feel like I've done enough. I don't feel like I've shown up the way that I want to show up, right? And this video was more so talking about in fatherhood, but you probably feel like that even outside of your role as a dad, even just your own individual metrics, your own habits and goals, and how you want to show up on a day to day basis, right? You probably feel like you're not showing up the best way, but the outside world would never be able to tell, right? And so if we were to name the experience, we're just going to name this experience just you feel like a fraud, right? And I'm going to go to my handy dandy notes here because I wrote down something that's important. I wrote down that it's not a parenting problem, it's an identity gap problem. So it's not that you're a bad dad. It's not that I'm a bad dad, right? That's not what's happening. What's happening is you have this almost unrealistic image, vision of what it means to be a great dad. And right now, your identity is not showing you that. And so, what I want to do is talk about ways that I've realized that within my own parenting journey and ways that you can realize it in your parenting journey and how to actually, close that gap between your identity and the man that you want to be, the dad that you want to be. And so let's talk about why does this happen in fatherhood? For me, I would say I think the biggest reason or one of the biggest reasons that this happens in fatherhood is because we were kind of taught, we were given like an old school playbook on how to be a dad, right? It was performance based metrics. How are you providing? How much money are you bringing to the table? You got to be the protector, right? And so these are all performance based metrics. And none of this is asking the question, how are you feeling internally? Right? Like, how do you feel on the inside? And so that's what we have to look into more is our inner world. And addressing how we feel internally, our internal state, that will kind of shape how we are able to show up as dads, not just being physically present. If you are not new to this channel, you always know my four areas of being present is physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual. So you won't be able to show up. And the truth is, you want to show up in all those areas, right? You don't want to just be labeled as I'm this, I'm the provider, I'm the disciplinarian. The truth is, you actually want to be all things as a man, all things as a father, but you'll never do that if you don't address your inner state and look on the inside. And I mean, I'm 38 years old, I'm a millennial. And if you're anywhere near my age, your dad was not doing this type of work on himself. And so it's just a cycle, right? And so that's what we want to do on this channel. And if you're listening to the podcast, that's what we want to do on this podcast. I always got to shout out my podcast, folks, is you want to change, you want to not even change, you want to first take a look at your inner state, right? How are you looking internally? And that will have some magnitude of an effect on how you're able to show up day to day. So, a good example of this, I would say in my own life is I 1000% am not the dad that takes pride in the yelling, right? I have become a lot more mindful, and I've become somebody who I just don't want to yell at my children. I'm human, so obviously I do it, but I'm intentional about not wanting to be that way. And I've come a long way. I have a 14-year-old who has heard me yell for probably half of his life, right? And now he doesn't hear it as much, right? Because of the work I'm doing. But there are moments in my life where, because I have a lot going on, I feel like my life sometimes can be a little unstable, chaotic, and I feel overwhelmed. And because I feel overwhelmed, I automatically assume the role of overwhelmed man working a 9 to 5, running a business, just parenting and the whole nine. And I then identify with an overwhelmed man as opposed to identifying as a dad that's trying his hardest. And as soon as I then identify with overwhelmed man, what happens is I start to react how overwhelmed man would react. And so there are many times I'm parenting and I'm like, I don't want to be this guy, but I'm yelling at my children. And it's like, I'm yelling, I'm apologizing, I'm feeling guilty about it. And I had to realize what the reason why I'm yelling is because I'm obviously not, my actions are not of the identity in who I want to be. I'm identifying as someone else. And so we're not saying, oh, once you get to a certain level, you're never going to be overwhelmed. You're never going to know the feeling of overwhelm. Of course you will. You'll know the feeling of overwhelm. You'll know the feeling of chaotic. You'll know the feeling of feeling like your life is unstable, but you're not going to identify with those things. So you shift your identity as a man that's just aware of these arisings happening, these things happening. You're able to be more responsive to your children rather than be super reactive. So that that's something that I struggle with, I deal with, and I'm managing, I would say almost daily when it comes to my parenting journey, right? And so we talked about the performance metrics. The other thing I want to say about that is, you know, in Buddhism, there's this concept of dukkha. And, for the purpose of this video, I'll say a good way to explain it is, and it could be relatable, is when you have this natural unsatisfactoriness, this natural I'm not fulfilled feeling. And the reason why you have this feeling is because you're chasing this like perfect version of a dad rather than just being patient and accepting who you are and finding out ways on how to shift your identity. So we do less of the accepting and more of the yearning for and more of the wanting. And once we do more of the yearning than the accepting, we have dukkha. We have this feeling of unsatisfactoriness, right? This feeling of not good enough. And so that's the way that I like to teach people when it comes to like, man, why am I feeling like this? I like to relate it back to you're feeling like that because you're chasing a version of yourself rather than firstly just accepting who you are in this moment. Okay. All right. And so the other thing I want to talk about is like, what is this gap actually telling you? Right. And the reason why this is important is because a lot of the times we beat ourselves up after we have become aware of flaws. And I would say, look at this gap as telling you as, man, I'm aware. I'm a self-aware guy. That's the first thing to do, right? You'd rather be someone that's aware that you're messed up internally than be the dad that's pretending everything is fine on the outside. And in my own journey, I've had to overcome that. I've been the person that I would just hide how I feel to anybody, to my friends, my family, even my children. I wouldn't tell them how I feel on the inside and I'll just pretend everything is okay. And then what happens? I blow up or something, right? Or I choose to be on my phone majority of the time and doom scroll instead of giving my kids the quality and the attention that they truly need and that they truly deserve. So these are the things that will happen to you if you are faking the funk. Like, don't fake the funk. Just be honest with yourself and realize that, I'm aware that I'm not feeling good internally. Awareness is like the beginning of the cure, you know? So we're not just trying to get to the cure immediately. We have to be aware first. And I like to think of it as in Zen, we say beginner's mind all the time, right? And so that's how I like to approach fatherhood. Even with a 14-year-old and a 4-year-old, I've been parenting for 14 years, right? And counting. And the number one thing that I try to do is treat my fatherhood journey as brand new to it, like beginner's mind, like, maybe this boy is going to teach me something. Maybe this little girl is going to teach me something. And completely open to that. I'm completely open to experiences in fatherhood that I didn't even see coming, right? Because I'm going into it with a beginner's mind. And so before we end, let's talk about how we can put some things into practice that will allow us to see this arising and how to be better about it. And I would say the number one thing is to journal, cultivate a journaling practice. You can write down every night, you can ask yourself a couple questions. Something that I do sometimes, and I do this with fatherhood and just in life in general. I say, where was I truly present today? Right? That could be as a dad, that could be as an employee, as a friend, as a family member. Where was I truly present today? And then I'll speak to that. And then I'll also ask, where was I performative today? Right? Like, where was I performing rather than being truly present? And I'll speak to that. And the more and more you journal about things like this, you start to uncover the core. You start to peel back the layers and you start to realize, like, you're not just tracking habits, you're tracking your internal state. And that truly is a component that will lead to, like everlasting change as a parent and as a man in general. And so you can journal free write, you can Google prompts. You can also check out my 365 Dad Journal. Link is in the description, and it's a year's worth of fatherhood prompts that I created based off of my own parenting journey. And so, yeah, I would say check out the 365 Dad Journal if you want something that's more, I would say, kind of guided for you. But if not, you can definitely just use a blank notebook, pen, paper, or pencil, and just kind of write down how you're feeling and where did you show up as a present father, and then where did you feel like you kind of were, it was more performative. And so these are things that you can do to, I would say, bridge the gap, make it a lot less when it comes to your identity, your desired identity, and how you're actually showing up in real time. And so I hope that was helpful. And man, I can't wait to see you all next week. Take care.